So another year, another World Cup going by, and another England draw with the United States. Still not able to beat the United States in a sport that they invented. Now, look, I'm not here to castigate the England team individually. I'm not here to castigate the fans holistically. What I am here to say is that all the coverage of this match leading up had USA losing 3 or 4-0. And I think that was the smart money. However, what I really want to talk about uh, is not so much the actual result, but the mentality of the English media and the English player. And then to talk a little bit about the Americans, who I thought were good in this match. And I think, strangely enough, as it sounds, will be a little bit disappointed with their manager for not giving them a real opportunity to win the match. Um, but let's talk about what led up to this particular match in the second game for both sides in their particular World Cup group. So England came out buzzing and beat what looked to be a very, very poor Iran side 6-2. And having watched that game, I spoke with some friends, a couple of whom live in the UK, and said that it looked like Iran were just not up to it. Maybe they were intimidated by the English players. Maybe the moment. I mean, obviously, there's a lot happening in their home country. There's a lot of pressure on the players in more ways than one, in ways that I think most professional athletes don't have to endure. And I think that it was a very disorienting experience for them. And losing 6-2 was obviously a romp that Iran didn't plan on, didn't expect. But if you look at what happened in the English press after that 6-2 victory against an Iranian team that, again, did not look up for it, people were saying it's coming home. The football's coming home. England are favorites to win the World Cup. And what happens every single time England come into a major tournament, they approach it like a game of football manager or fantasy football, as if you can just look at players on the team sheet, hit a simulation button, and then that's what's going to happen. That's the result. And this is what I think has always driven me crazy about the England football team on the men's side. Now let's contrast that with the United States for a minute. Let's talk about how we got here. The United States played to a disappointing 1-1 draw with Wales. Their manager came under a lot of scrutiny. I myself have never been a fan of this particular manager. His name is Greg Berhalter. I have found over the last 3 years his lineup choices to be suspect, his tactics to be sometimes problematic, and his substitutions to not always be very sharp. That said, I think in this match against England, he got things exactly right. Instead of lining up in a 4-3-3, which is what I think it looked like, the United States played a 4-4-2. And the reason they did that is because they dared the English team to try to play through the flanks and play around their mid-block press. They took Timothy Weah and Haji Wright as the two forwards and played them very, very narrow and prevented easy passes from Maguire and John Stones into the midfield. They basically said, all right, go ahead and play around us. And whenever Stones or Maguire tried to play a ball out to the wings or out wide, the American players were right on them, gave them no space to operate. And Sterling and Saka, as well as Mason Mount, whenever the midfielders got a bit wide, they weren't able to play through the United States mid-block press. Very, very good tactical execution from the Americans. On top of that, not on my bingo card, was the American midfield completely outplaying man for man their English counterparts. And this is really what I want to talk about, because all of the talk right now is about how poor England were. Listen, I think a lot of times when it comes to English footballers, you have a press and a media that grossly overrates these players, that grossly overpays them at the clubs in which they play, and grossly overhypes. There's talk right now, and there has been talk for about a year, of Declan Rice making a £100 million move to Chelsea. If Declan Rice is a £100 million player, I don't know what we're doing anymore in the world of world football. I have no clue how you can look at Declan Rice's performances this season for West Ham United in the latter part of last season and watch that performance against a USA midfield, which on paper is inferior to the England team. Look at Declan Rice and the way he was completely anonymous, barely even knew he was on the pitch, and say that this is a £100 million player. In the same way, I don't think Jack Grealish is a £100 million player. I'm going to look up right now how many goals Jack Grealish has in a Man City shirt. This is a Man City team that paid £100 million for Jack Grealish, and let's see what they've got. Well, this season, 8 matches, 1 goal, 0 assists. Last season, 26 matches, 3 goals, 3 assists, and 3 yellow cards. The man had more yellow cards last season for Man City, as many yellow cards as he had goals. This is a £100 million player. If Jack Grealish was English, or better yet, if he was an American, they would call him a flop. They would value him at 15 million, at 20 million. If Declan Rice was an American and he put in that kind of performance, they would say he didn't belong in the Premier League. That's something that the English press would say. Now, of course, I don't think that's true. I think the English press is a hugely reactive. If you want to, this guy's not a member of press. I'm rambling a little bit. If you want to sort of get an encapsulation of the English mindset, go over to the Rory Jennings football channel right now. I actually quite like Rory. He's a guy who wears his heart in his sleeve. He seems like a nice dude. I've obviously never met him. My channel is a minnow, and he has a really big channel. But after they played Iran, Rory was out there saying that England are going to win the World Cup. After the draw against the U.S. last night, Rory then subsequently said they should sack their manager mid-tournament and that there's no chance they win the World Cup now. They're an extreme people, the English. And what I think is extremely funny about all this is it was clear to me, and we're going to talk about the U.S. side in a minute. I think some of this, like this was a good performance. The concerns with the U.S. have never been how they play against superior oppositions, how they play against teams they should beat, or we're going to come up in a low block against them, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But when you look at this English side, it's pretty clear to me that a number of the players perhaps thought they were just going to go out there and the States were going to roll over and die. And then when that didn't happen, and in fact, when America punched them in the mouth a couple times, and if the States had any like semblance of a really good number 9, I think England might have been in trouble, right? Because there were some chances that went begging. McKennie had a glorious chance to put them up 1-0. Pulisic wasn't really a sort of out of nothing chance, but he rattled the bar, didn't he? Pulisic also had a header in the box that went wide. Haji Wright had a header in the box that was nowhere near on target. So the States had the lion's share of the significant chances in that match, and I think their XG was higher. Should have been. Although that Pulisic strike is going to count as a very low XG because it was sort of out of nowhere and hit from a strange angle. And honestly, a surprise he rattled the bar. That would have been a wonder strike if I ever saw one. But I think when the Americans came out and were not afraid of the English players, went right at them, I think you can see it. People are going to probably castigate me in the comments if they even watch this video. I would say like and subscribe. I upload so infrequently, and I do these lives so infrequently. There's almost no point. But I think that the reaction from the English players was weak. It was weak. I mean, when you look at this team, you look at Bukayo Saka and Raheem Sterling. I don't know what's happened to Raheem Sterling. He's been poor for Chelsea. He doesn't take players on anymore. He loses the ball a lot. If he's not doing interlink and interchange up near the box, he's not really doing much for you. He's not going to turn and face you anymore and run past you with the ball. He's not going to do what Pulisic does. Not saying Pulisic is a better player than Raheem Sterling. I'm simply saying that what Pulisic does is he'll turn and face you and he'll play past you. Raheem Sterling doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't seem to take players on. Bukayo Saka will. But the Americans were so fixated on starving those guys for space and playing really tight up on them every time Raheem Sterling got the ball. Somebody was cutting his space down, and then they would drag a second player over and make him play the ball negative and backwards. The Americans were quite happy with giving England the ball in their own half and just playing that mid-block press and essentially inviting England to try to play around them. And when you look at the possession stats, England had about 10-15% more of the possession. But when you look at where that possession was built, you're talking about England center halves, John Stones and Harry Maguire, dinging it back and forth as the American center forwards just stared at them and said, play through us. And they couldn't. Because at the end of the day, Ray Hudson said something in 2010. He called the English players overhyped, overpaid, overrated, and static and unathletic. Now, that's not true with all of them. There are some very athletic players. Some of them are on the bench. Phil Foden would have been great in this match. I don't think you bring him on as a substitution when you just want to get the point, but he probably should have lined up with Phil Foden, and most of the media are saying that. But when I look at that midfield, with the exception of Jude Bellingham, now Mason Mount, very hard worker, very tenacious, not a very dynamic player. Good at making late runs to the box, can strike a ball well, and generally gives you a lot of effort. But he's not supremely skilled on the ball. He's not super silky. He's not going to run through players. It's not the kind of player he is, right? Jude Bellingham, 19 years old. That's a lot to throw on him. And Declan Rice, I'm help me figure out why Declan Rice is a 100 million pound player in some people's eyes. What do you see that is worth 100 million pounds other than the fact that he looks the part and he's English? The other day on Talk Sport, I don't remember who it was, but one of these so-called pundits was saying that Declan Rice is better than Casemiro, the four-time Champions League winner, Casemiro. It's insane to me. I've heard these English press and English YouTubers comparing the England team and the Brazilian team and saying the Brazilian players wouldn't get in the team. Is that Jason Cundy that said the other day that he would take Mason Mount, a guy who scored one Premier League goal this season, over Neymar? Now, of course, the team that lines up on the pitch doesn't represent the punditry, right? But it's hard for me. I mean, I remember when Graham Souness criticized Jack Grealish. Jack Grealish responded to him in the press and kept like going back and forth with him. It was like a whole talk sport thing. I wonder about the mentality of these English players. Some of them, not Harry Kane. Harry Kane has an elite mentality. Looked to be playing with a knock. He was by far the most threatening player for England. He was unfortunate not to score. Walker Zimmerman made a great block on him early in the first half. And then right at the end there, he had a header that was off target. I think it was England's last significant contribution in the match. But he was a threat. I think the American center halves did a really good job not giving him any space. You know, Harry Kane likes to drop way, way back in the midfield sometimes to get involved in the match, and fair enough. But down the line, I mean, this match was lost for England, even though, I mean, they didn't lose it, but 0-0 to the United States will feel like a loss for England. In the midfield, Tyler Adams was bought by Leeds United for less than 20 million euros. Weston McKennie, I can't imagine he has a valuation of more than 30 million pounds. Wait, did I just say 17,000 euros? No, I said 17 million euros for Tyler Adams. I'm sorry. If I less than 20 million, I think I said 20,000. That's not what I meant to say. And then I doubt most people in the English press knew much about Yunus Musa, even though he came up through the English system. He plays at Valencia, and he's 19. I doubt that he was on the radar. But if combined, I think the combined valuation of that U.S. midfield has got to be somewhere between 60 and 70 million. You're telling me that Declan Rice is worth all three of them put together? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is the issue I have. Like, they're valuing Jude Bellingham at 150 million pounds. Now, Jude Bellingham is quality. I watch a lot of Dortmund. Really good player. He's 19 years old. 19 years old. Look at the valuation they put on Jadon Sancho. Has he worked out for Man United? Has he been good? Now, let's look at his stats right now for Man United. All right. Jadon Sancho. Let's look it up together right now while we're live streaming. Let's look up the stats. 10 matches in the Premier League, 2 goals, 1 assist. That's this year. Let's look at how he did last year. 29 matches. By the way, never played out of position. People used to love to compare Jadon Sancho with Christian Pulisic. Pulisic has played as a wing back most of the time for Chelsea, which is way out of his position. And Jadon Sancho gets his preferred look in the team all the time. 3 goals, 3 assists in 29 matches. That's a woeful return for Jadon Sancho. Let's see what his transfer fee was. Jadon Sancho transfer fee. Yep, 85 million euros. That's $100 million. So not quite as high as the Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham valuation. But when are England going to stop doing this? When are they going to stop playing at this idea that if you just name players and the teams they play for on a team sheet, then you should win 4-5-0 every match? You have to go out and win the game. It's the height of English arrogance because what they say after every single match I see is, "Oh, England were poor. Oh, they should have done this. They should have done that. Should have won this game easily." International football is not club football. Club football is you get the top teams buy the best players, right? And then they work with them every single week to have a system that's going to maximize their potential. International football, you get a whole bunch of names, whole bunch of players, and you hope that the manager can communicate his ideas simply enough and to have them build a team spirit and a team cohesion enough to go out and win some games. That's club football and international football are two totally different things. And even in club football, you will see the odd result where a Man City or a Liverpool will lose to a team like Nottingham Forest, like Leeds United, 2-1 at Anfield. The best players don't always win. You have to show up. You have to have an elite mentality. You have to play together. You have to play for each other. You have to play for the shirt. I cannot tell you one time, as long as I've been alive, with the exception of England getting to a final and losing on penalties, where I really thought English players played for the shirt and played with the kind of passion that some of these other countries that their whole media, and I think some of them condescend. Yes, on paper, should England have beaten the United States? Of course they should have. Nobody has won a World Cup on paper. Nobody. And if we're doing this on paper calculation, I think we have to be honest with the reality that some of the English players are not quite as good as they're cracked out to be. Let's look at Phil Foden for a second. Now, Phil Foden, I think, is an elite world-class talent. But the way he's being described right now in the English press, and I don't really have a strong opinion about this, is that, he's the second coming of Zinedine Zidane. Now let's look at his statistics. All right. So Phil Foden is a very good footballer. Great footballer. But this season, good numbers. Has played 14 matches, 7 goals, 3 assists. That's really, really good. Last season, 28 matches, 9 goals, 5 assists. So that's good. But it's not great, is it? 2020 and 2021, 28 matches, 9 goals, 5 assists. Duplicate of the season before, right? Now he's 22 years old, and I think that's what we look at here. And so far, he's scored 7 goals, 3 assists this season. Those are great numbers. Half season gone. He should be somewhere around 15 goals, 6, 7, 8 assists in that Man City team. That's elite. So you can see why they're clamoring for him. But the idea that you just look at a player, look at where he plays, what team he plays for, and think that you can put them all together and that the world should roll out the red carpet and for you just to go out and win. And if you don't win, then somehow it's just that you didn't show up. They don't give any credit to the other teams. Not a lot of people I hear are giving real credit to the United States side for how they played. I'm super critical of this American team. Extremely critical of them. I think watching their manager say, go play the ball in the corner instead of get a last ditch opportunity to win the match at the end, I think tells you everything you need to know about this team and this manager. But excuse me, the way they played last night was brilliant. And they had the lion's share of the good chances. And in terms of the possession they had England pinned back in their own half quite a bit when America had the ball. So England may have had more of the possession, but I think in terms of the significant and threatening possession, America, the United States was in a better position. So, look, I think what is silly to me and reflective of what I think will be another failure of England's in a major tournament is the refusal and inability of people, I think, within the England camp and probably within the media apparatus around them to properly assess their own talent pool. We do this a little bit in the United States. So, for instance, Weston McKennie, he was brilliant against England. He was very poor against Wales. People think sometimes that because he plays at Juventus, we should just be able to put him on the pitch and he'll be better than everybody in the midfield. No, That's not how football works. That's not how sport works. There are times, like if you, yeah, that's probably true if you let them play 10 matches in a row. 8 times out of 10, the player at the better club will probably win that matchup. But in tournament play, you don't get 10 matches against the same sides. You get like in this group stage, it's more than likely the United States are only going to play England once every like 5 or 6 years in general, right? So all the Americans had to do is be better in some areas of the park one time. I feel like I'm watching Little Giants. And that's what they did. That's exactly what they did. The midfield of Yunus Musa, Tyler Adams, and Weston McKennie put the midfield that's valued. Let's see, Declan Rice 100 million, Jude Bellingham 150 million, and Mason Mount. I'm sure he has like an 80 to 100 million valuation. Like the United States midfield is probably valued a sixth of the value of England's. And they looked better than those English players yesterday. Now, I'm not saying if they played every single day or every week for 10 weeks, that would be the case. But if we're looking for responsibility, people are going to point at Southgate and say that his subs were wrong or that his lineup was wrong. And I think you can make the case that his lineup, not including Phil Foden, was perhaps naive. That maybe Raheem Sterling is not better than Phil Foden at this stage in his career. But it's very hard for me to look at what's happening in the English press and the English reaction corps on YouTube. We're all pointing this on the finger at Southgate, the guy who's got them to the only final they've been in who knows how long, who seems to understand that you can't just throw the best players together and expect a result. You have to build a team. Who persisted with a guy like Harry Maguire, who everybody and their mother would tell you is bad at his club and probably shouldn't be in the England team. But for some reason, in an England shirt, and I think the some reason is he doesn't have to defend a high line like they have to do at Man United. I mean, he can defend in a low block. And it's pretty clear that if he's being tasked with clearances and getting on the end of headers on set pieces, Harry Maguire's elite. Now, some of this comes down to the Americans not having a true number 9, but I mean, really, was there ever a point where the United States really looked threatening for the number 9 position? No, I don't think so. So Southgate has made tough calls, and he has, I think, galvanized the group to play for him. And he's taken them further than any other manager has. But that's not what the narrative is. The narrative is we have better talent than everybody else, so we should win the World Cup. That's all you hear. And the mentality seems to be that if England just turn up on the day, there's not a team that can beat them. Again, they're making comparisons with the Brazilian side, saying, "Oh, who would you take from Brazil to replace anybody in England's lineup?" There's a lot in the Brazilian team I would take over English players, starting with the 2 center halves. I mean, we could do this all day. I think it's the same old story for England, isn't it? A team with a star-studded lineup. In 2010, the English lined up with Steven Gerrard. Actually, let's look at that lineup right now, because I don't want to get it wrong. England, USA, 2010. Let's see. Let's look at the side lineups. All right. England lined up with Ashley Cole, Aaron Lennon, John Terry, James Milner, Emil Heskey. Ooh, all right. So maybe it wasn't a star-studded. Wayne Rooney, Glenn Johnson, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, and Jamie Carragher. Well, they started with Ledley King. And they played against a side that had Landon Donovan in it, Josie Altidore, who scored 2 Premier League goals in his entire 2-season Premiership career, Onyewu, Ricardo Clark, an MLS midfielder, Carlos Bocanegra, Clint Dempsey, Steve Cherundolo, Robbie Finley, an MLS striker, and then who went off for Edson Buttle, Michael Bradley, and Jay DeMerit. Anybody who knows football would have said that those lineups are unequally yoked, that the English team on paper was far superior, and yet it was a 1-1 draw. England had a star-studded team that season, and how did they actually do in that tournament? Not particularly well. It's not a game of Football Manager. This isn't fantasy football. I'm repeating myself, but The English never seem to learn. This happens every tournament, doesn't it? Every tournament, it seems like. Every World Cup. Every World Cup, they just expect to show up and win. I'm rambling now. For some context, I lived in England for about 4 years. I lived in both Bristol and Leeds. One of the reasons I'm a Leeds United supporter. I love England. It's my second home. However, nothing makes me happier than when the English national team underperform. Because then you get to hear the apology train who just will not ever say, who will not self-reflect and say, hey, are we as good as we think we are? Probably not. Maybe we're not that great. Maybe Declan Rice isn't worth 100 million pounds. Good player. Let's not misarticulate. Let's not misspeak. Declan Rice is a really good player. He hasn't been good this season for West Ham, but he's a very good player. Jude Bellingham is going to be perhaps a world-class midfielder, maybe one of the best England's had in a long time. He's not there yet. He's 19. He's looked great for Borussia Dortmund, but consistency over time, like you need to watch players do it season after season. You can see with Phil Foden year after year, he's building upon what he's done. So, like, I think his hype is justified. Jack Grealish, as far as I can recall, has had 1 or 2 really good seasons. Let's see his stats. Let's look at his statistics right now. So for Man City, we all know the story. 26 matches last season, 3 goals, 3 assists. That's a woeful return for a guy who was bought for 100 million pounds. This season, 8 matches, 1 goal, no assists. Woeful return. Aston Villa. Okay. Are these the numbers of a world-class talent? 2021. 26 matches, 6 goals, 10 assists. It's good. These are really good numbers for a mid to lower table Premier League side, but he's not turning up trees. He's had, again, as many yellow cards as he had goals that season. The season before, in 36 matches, 8 goals, 6 assists. Good numbers. Good numbers. 100 million pound player numbers? Get out of here. James Maddison. Let's look at him. All right, for Leicester. 2020-2021. 31 matches, 8 goals, 5 assists. 21-22. 12 goals, 8 assists in 35 matches. This season, 13 matches, 7 goals, 4 assists. He's not been fit. These are better numbers than Jack Grealish. Why is James Maddison at 26 not carrying the same valuation as Jack Grealish? Makes you wonder. They have a weird way of valuing some players and undervaluing some others. I don't understand. They act like, Jack Grealish had the audacity to make fun of Miguel Almiron, to castigate him in the press. Almiron has more goals than he has in one season than he has in his last 2. Shut up, Grealish. I think there are some English players I really like. I think Bukayo Saka is a great kid. Awesome to watch. Wonderful for Arsenal. Continues to improve. Still so young. I think Phil Foden, as much as he looks like a Hollyoaks character in a tracksuit, I think is a fabulous player. And I love watching him play. Harry Kane. It's very difficult not to like Harry Kane. It's hard not to cheer for Maguire after all the stuff he's gone through. Jude Bellingham. Like to watch him. Declan Rice? Meh. Mason Mount, hard worker. Don't dislike him as a kid. Seems like a good kid. But I'm supposed to buy into Jack Grealish as a 100 million pound player? Do you? Honestly, if you're English right now and you're watching this, do you really think that Jack Grealish is worth 100 million pounds? 100 million pounds. Declan Rice, 100 million pounds. Tyler Adams, bought for less than 20 million pounds. You're telling me that one Declan Rice is worth 5 Tyler Adams? No. If you watch that match and if you've watched Leeds United all year and you don't think that Tyler Adams right now, if you wouldn't have Tyler Adams over Declan Rice on your side right now, based on form the last season, then you're just ridiculously biased. Tyler Adams is having a better season at Leeds United than Declan Rice is for having at West Ham. He looks better for the United States midfield than Declan Rice looks in the England team. It should be easier to play in the England team because you're surrounded by really good talent in a lot of positions. I'm not saying these players aren't any good. I'm not on here saying that they're overrated and they must be gash. I'm on here saying that these players aren't as good as you think they are. They're not valued fairly, accurately. There's no way you can look at Declan Rice and say he's a 100 million pound player. I'm going to look at the last, record transfer fees Premiership. Let's look at it right now. Let's look. Transfer market. Okay, yes, we'll accept all the cookies. Great. All right. Second all time is Jack Grealish from Man City at 117 million euros. Number 3 is Eden Hazard, who went to Real Madrid for 115 million. Now, it's pretty clear that that hasn't worked out for him. But Eden Hazard, his stats at Chelsea are otherworldly. His stats at Chelsea, let's just go through them. 16-17, 16 goals, 5 assists in 36 matches. The next season, 34 matches, 12 goals, 4 assists. The next season, 37 matches, 16 goals, 15 assists. There's nobody in the England team. Nobody doing that right now. So the fact that, I know inflation, makes a difference. But you're telling me that Jack Grealish is worth more than Eden Hazard in his prime? Get out of here. I don't care how inflated the economy is. Jadon Sancho has the 10th largest transfer fee in the history of the Premier League. Jadon Sancho, the guy with worse numbers than Christian Pulisic, has the 10th largest transfer fee. Now, he's not even in the England squad. My God. Harry Maguire was bought for 87 million. He's not an 87 million euro center half. He's not. He did a great job last night. He's not worth that money. I just can't do it. I can't deal with it. Casemiro was bought for 70 million. You're telling me that Declan Rice is worth 30 million more than Casemiro? He's not. He's not. I wouldn't pay 60 million for Declan Rice right now. I would pay 45 to 50 million for Declan Rice. That's what I would pay. I would pay 45 to 50 million for Jude Bellingham. That's what I would pay. No, I'd probably pay 75, 80 million for Jude Bellingham because he's so young. And he continues to improve exponentially season over season. He's a box-to-box midfielder. He does a lot more than, what's going to show up on a stat sheet. You have to dive into the analytics. I would pay... What would I pay for a Mason Mount? I would pay... Maybe I'd pay Casemiro money for a Mason Mount because Mason Mount's still quite young. But I don't understand where the value proposition for some of these English players comes from. And I think that it contributes to this culture because they'll look at how much was paid for a player. And they'll say, well, he's a 100 million pound midfielder. You should, our midfield's worth over 300 million pounds combined. They should boss these Americans up just by showing up. Doesn't work that way. Weston McKennie had Declan Rice in the bin. Tyler Adams had these guys in his pocket. Yunus Musa at 19 looked like he could have gotten in the England side the other day. Not saying he's as good as those players currently. And I'll be the first to tell you, I think, with the exception of Tyler Adams, who I think right now, the way he's playing, we'll see if he can do it season over season. But the way he's playing, Calvin Phillips got in the England team. I would take Tyler Adams for Leeds over Calvin Phillips. Right now, I would take Tyler Adams over Declan Rice. I wouldn't take him over Mason Mount. They're not the same type of player. And I wouldn't take McKennie over Mason Mount. I'd take Mason Mount over McKennie. Yunus Musa at 19, debatable. I would still take Mason Mount has good numbers in the Premier League. Good numbers. Anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. But listen, I think that we have to get in the United States into the United States team. So there's still a real possibility. After all that I've just said, still a real possibility the United States goes out against Iran and goes out in 3. I predicted this. I've been on the One Leads fan channel. I said that the United States would be out 3 and out. The reason, Iran has proven they're no slouch. They beat Wales 2-0. For anyone that remembers, it was only a little while ago, we drew Wales 1-1. And all it took to disrupt us was to send a big lad our way, run through the channels, and have a little bravery against us. On paper, we are better than Iran. The reverse of the England scenario is what could come into play for the States here. I'm reminded of a certain match in Trinidad against Trinidad and Tobago, where all the United States had to do was get a result, and they qualified for the World Cup. A Trinidad and Tobago B team, and the United States lost. So I don't like this kind of calculus where you put all your eggs in the basket of winning against an Iranian team that has been up and down. Down against England, they seemed afraid, out of their depths. They were everything the United States were not, intimidated and afraid and scared of the England team. But then they went out against Wales, and Wales were the better side for most of the match. Iran were lucky to be level into stoppage time, and then they took their chances. If the United States can't generate chances against an Iranian team that's going to probably, all they have to do is tie. I mean, to be honest, all they have to, that's all they have to do is tie. It's 0-0 draw, and they'll go through. We won't. We'll go home. So I think real questions are going to be asked of why Greg Berhalter decided to leave. So far, our number 9 play has not been good. I thought Haji Wright was tenacious against England, but he didn't really pose a goal-scoring threat, which is what you want from your number 9. So far, we've scored 1 goal in this tournament. Came from Tim Weah, and it was a just wonderfully taken chance, but individual moment of brilliance playing Weah in and Weah finishing it off well. But, our number 9s haven't generated chances and haven't scored. And Greg Berhalter left Ricardo Pepi and Jordan Pefok home. 2 guys played the number 9s, true number 9s, scoring goals. He brought Jesus Ferreira and 4 right backs. Maybe some other options at forward would have been nice. Left some guys home that were more creative, more pacey, have more guile. Brought a guy like Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris. Jordan Morris isn't going to score us goals. He's not an elite goal scorer in MLS. He's not going to do it on the international stage. So I think that some of Greg Berhalter's squad choices may come back to haunt us. I'm a U.S. supporter I'm not married to my own predictions. I would much rather be wrong. I'm worried. It's one thing to be punching up. It's another thing to be punching down. And when you're punching down, you have to have guys who can throw a solid haymaker. Iran's going to be very dialed into Christian Pulisic. They're not going to give him a lot of space. They're probably going to kick him all match. The United States needs somebody that can take some chances. Maybe you play Tim Weah up front. I don't know. But I'm concerned. But for the actual match against England, I thought while he was shaky with the ball at his feet, Walker Zimmerman acquitted himself well. Obviously, he made an error in the match against Wales. It's just a ridiculous challenge on Gareth Bale. And why is it a ridiculous challenge? Well, because the striker has his back to you in the box, right? He's not facing up on you. To go to the ground and try to win that tackle and make a play is a foolish, just bad decision. Anybody who plays center half knows that. He acquitted himself well. A vital block against Harry Kane and didn't put a foot wrong defensively the entire match. Headed a lot of in-swingers and out-swingers away. Still not great with the ball at his feet. A little bit nervy. Gave the ball away needlessly a couple times just without pressure, which is odd. But did fine. Tim Ream played great. What a swan song for Tim Ream, finally getting his opportunity. He's been around for a long time, but never really. Um, I think he's playing the best football in his career at 35, 36 years old, which is kind of wild. And I don't know. He's been a good servant of the program. I'm glad he's getting a moment. Um, Sergio Dest played okay. I thought he played well defensively. That's always the concern about him, isn't he? His defensive work. Um, he is somebody you can shake free of, but I mean, I thought he did really well on Raheem Sterling, which is, or used to be a hard mark. I'm not sure how good Sterling is anymore. Why he continues to get the start in the team over a guy like Phil Foden. But and then on the other side, I thought Jedi Robinson was great going forward sometimes. Sometimes he just boneheadedly loses the ball. Caught out of position a bunch, does well to track back. But if we didn't have Tyler Adams, we'd be in trouble. That's where, for me, the man of the match is Tyler Adams and has been both matches everywhere. I've never seen him play this well. I've never seen a U.S. midfielder play this well in the whole center defensive midfielder. Never, never. I mean, to play that well against England is, and I've already made my case that I think these English midfielders are overrated in terms of the money valuations, but they're still very good players, and on paper better than the Americans. And maybe you can't say that about Tyler Adams anymore. Maybe they're not better than he is. Weston McKennie, as bad as he was against Wales, and he was bad, he was very loose against Wales. He was feeling it against England. Wish he had finished that chance, but I was pleased with his display. Bold and confident on the ball, taking players on. When he decides he wants to be a problem for the opposing team, he is. If he could keep from leaning back when he strikes the ball, that'd be wonderful because he might have had a goal. But pleased with this performance. Yunus Musa for a 19-year-old, immense. Strong, balanced, good with the ball. Maybe fouling a little bit too much. Maybe some of his exuberance is a little bit too much. But those three for me were great. And then Pulisic, I think Americans tend to overhype Pulisic as well. I mean, I think Pulisic is a very, very good player. He's not proven that he's a top shelf player yet. Top shelf players do it year after year after year. Now, if you don't get the opportunities in a team like Chelsea, which guys like Hakim Ziyech aren't getting opportunities in a team like Chelsea, where they seem to rotate quite heavily, then go somewhere else. Go to Newcastle. I would much rather see Pulisic play week in, week out. We'll see what he can really do in the Premier League. Because when you're in the Premier League, you're playing all the same teams the big clubs are. You're just not playing Champions League. So I think that would actually help Pulisic. He's already won a Champions League. So maybe play less matches, stay fit, play for a club like Newcastle or somebody else in the top 10, and prove to us and prove to the world, and prove to the people that underrate you, and maybe I'm doing that, but that when you get a consistent run of games and you can stay fit and you can start at your preferred position for about 30 matches in a season, then you'll be elite. That you're knocking in 15, 16 goals a season, 9, 10 assists. If you can do that, then I'll say that maybe you're world class. But so far, we have no evidence that he is. We have evidence that he's very skillful, very good, can cause problems for defenders. That's all we can say right now. And I'm happy with that. I don't think that's slagging him off. He's the most skillful American player on the pitch right now. I thought Tim Weah was good. He was lively. I would prefer to see Gio Reyna. I would prefer to see maybe more Brendan Aronson and have Tim Weah up front. But this is the way it is. Berhalter doesn't seem to want to play him as a 9. So this is what we got. And then 9, Haji Wright, I said he was kind of pedestrian. Anyway, what are your predictions? All right. So this is going to be my prediction here. I think... Here's what I hope happened. I hope we get a 2-0 USA victory. Something in me says it's going to be a 1-1 draw and the USA go out. That's what I predicted. That's what I think is going to happen. But I hope I am wrong. If we win 6-0, come out here and make fun of me, and I'll make fun of myself. Anyway, that's it. Just kind of had a long rant. But as somebody who spent a significant amount, well, I guess it wasn't that significant, it's about 4 years, but at a seminal period in my life when I was maturing, I think that I have a soft spot in my heart for England. And it frustrates me to see them do the same thing every tournament. I'll never really get it. But anyway, if If you like more content on this, you can see me on the One Leads fan channel. I'm going to be doing more stuff with them. Connor's been very gracious to have me on the show for the World Cup, and looks like we'll be doing more stuff for Leeds United going forward. So anyway, guys, talk to you later.